The options for survivors to disclose sexual abuse by a family member or someone known to them without any additional consequences of burden are very difficult. Many survivors suffer in silence because of the stigma, shame, and guilt attached to such trauma. Others keep quiet because of the fear of blame. And for those who manage to speak out, like me, often find themselves rejected and ostracized by their family and social circle. Without support to articulate these issues, the impact of not doing so can have devastating effects on the survivor, who is not only left confined to a world of isolation, but are unable to break out of their prison of silence. I was 9 years old when my father started to sexually abuse me. My life as I knew it changed from normality to chaos and despair. There were never any warning signs that I was in any danger, and I certainly never imagined such a thing could happen to me, but it did. That fateful day when he called me upstairs to my parents' bedroom, I assumed it was to be given chores, but instead, my father raped me. It was not a one-off incident, and for 5 years of my life, it became a common occurrence. That was until one day, when I was 13 years old, I learned during a visit from Childline, a children's charity that came to my school, the name for what was happening to me: sexual abuse. The realization and consequences of my disclosure slowly dawned on me after I was taken into government care at 13 years old. As I tried to come to terms with the betrayal, the voice that I courageously found in speaking out about my abuse quietly faded away. There were many factors in why this happened. I was placed in a foster care placement with people I didn't know, in a new environment, away from my family. I had trust issues. I found it hard to talk to anyone, especially adults. I was without family support, and it became clear on being taken into care that my mum and my family were going to support my dad, whilst I was left without the only family I had ever known. The people that had been around me my entire life suddenly were not there. But one of the biggest reasons why I lost my voice was because I believed I was to blame for what had happened to me. I felt sad and lost, guilty and ashamed that I had done something wrong, because why did it happen to me? It didn't happen to my brother or sister. And because of that, I felt something was inherently wrong with me. Besides these issues, I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, suffered from depression, and had other mental health challenges. In order to cope with the trauma, I internalized my pain and turned to alcohol, drugs, and self-harming as a way of dealing with the overwhelming sense of pain and loss that I felt. I became a prisoner in the aftermath to my challenges in sexual abuse. This experience is not exclusive to me. It is the story and journey of millions of adult survivors worldwide trying to cope with and make sense of the devastation left behind in the aftermath of sexual abuse. It is indiscriminate in the lives that it affects: male and female, young and old, people from different races, religions, classes, and cultures, have been its victim. Sexual abuse of a child can be defined as contact or non-contact. It can involve sexual touching, penetration, coercing a child into sexual activity, flashing, showing a child inappropriate images, amongst a range of other behaviour and actions. Statistics from organisations such as NSPCC are reporting 1 in 20. And in the US, figures from organisations such as Darkness to Light report that 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys have been sexually abused as children. The World Health Organization estimates there are 800 million survivors worldwide. These figures are just estimates, but could be considerably more. Because of the stigma attached to disclosing this epidemic crime, we may never know the true number of lives affected. What we do know from data gathered from different organizations and charities that help and support victims and survivors of sexual abuse is that 90% of sexual abuse is committed by someone the child knows, loves, or trusts. The perpetrator can be anyone: parent, sibling, teacher, coach, neighbor, friend. It is someone the child knows who has access to the child. It is because of this depth of betrayal, the stigma, and the implications involved in speaking out that cause many survivors to withdraw, isolate self, and internalize their trauma. Whilst there has been an increase in the amount of survivors contacting organizations in the wake of revelations regarding well-known celebrities and other high-profile people, many still feel unable to tell their family and friends for fear of judgment and repercussions. It is important to note it can take a survivor many years to open up about what has happened to them. For each survivor, besides emotional, behavioral, or psychological effects they may experience, other factors such as generational attitudes, who the perpetrator is, how long the abuse lasted, and social backdrop can have an influence on their decision to speak out. What happens in many cases, sometimes years later, when the survivor finds the courage to speak out, is their disclosure is met with immediate denial. Some are labeled troublemakers or liars for daring to voice the unimaginable. It is incredibly difficult for a child to articulate that they are being sexually abused, especially if they don't know what is happening to them. And there are other factors that play a part in why they don't tell someone sooner. They may have been threatened to keep quiet or told no one would believe them. The perpetrator may be older, well-liked, in a position of power or authority. Or the survivor may have conflicting feelings towards the person because in another area of their life they have provided for their needs. The society mindset is an adult is automatically seen as a person of truth, whilst the child can be seen as capable of making up stories. In denying and not acknowledging the trauma caused to the survivor, it can have a compounding effect on their recovery, healing, and life. There is also a generational mindset that is passed down in some families. They believe what goes on in your house stays in your house, or that you don't air your dirty laundry in public, meaning that family affairs should not be privy to the ears of strangers. So you'll find in these circumstances, the survivor will keep it to themselves, for fear of bringing shame on the family. But in making that decision to do so, it allows the perpetrator to go unaccountable for their actions, and it does not protect other children they may have access to. These are just some examples of the challenges faced in speaking out. There is huge risk and personal cost involved in doing so. Loss of relationships, rejection, possible humiliation, and scrutiny can weigh heavily on the survivor's mind. I first identified the need for supportive empowerment on leaving care at 17 years old. As a survivor looking for help, I found there were no complete interactive support programs available for people experiencing issues such as mine. So in 2011, after many years of facing my own challenges, I decided to set up Daughter Arise, an organisation designed to create empowerment through peer support. I used my experience and the lack of what was missing in terms of support as the building block for my vision of providing a network that helps survivors. Supportive empowerment is about breaking down walls to reach the survivor by providing a helping hand, a safe space for them to open up about their challenges and to engage in activities that help them to find their voice. The idea is simple in its approach. By hiring a community hall and providing tea and refreshments, I have created an empowering environment for the survivor to find support amongst others who've had similar experiences. The tools that we use are both communicative and interactive. For example, we did an exercise called Hidden Hearts. I gave each survivor a large heart balloon and a small balloon, and on pieces of paper, they wrote down emotions and feelings they hide within themselves that affect their everyday life. Once done, the small pieces of paper were put inside the small balloon, then inside the large heart balloon, which they blew up and tied. On the outside of the heart balloon, they wrote down how they presented to people in their everyday life. Some wrote happy, joyful, approachable, others quiet, talkative, serious. In doing this exercise, it opened the way for honest dialogue between the survivors, and for the first time, those who had never shared how they felt before were able to talk about how their hidden hurts had affected them, and also to finally face the feelings and fears that they've held inside for so long. For many survivors, living in a prison of isolation has proved to have a destructive impact on their life. In taking part in these interactive sessions, it has helped the survivor to gain a different insight into how their experience has affected them, and also help them to build self-esteem and confidence. When we get together as a group, we are able to listen to one another and support each other in the power of unity. It never felt possible to be able to do this before, but in sharing my story, providing the environment, tools and resources to facilitate this, it has now become a reality. Survivors of sexual abuse are typically changed by their experience, not only because they were traumatized, but also because they feel the loss of innocence and dignity. The overwhelming weight of that shame comes to define the survivor, shaping and influencing their choices, keeping them from their potential. At governmental level, I believe there is a lack of understanding of the scale of the problem and how it impacts the survivor. The government should not only invest in opening counselling and support centres that could help make a difference in restoring lives, but also employ survivors with knowledge and experience in consultancy roles to help advise and guide them on decisions regarding this issue. Research from the World Health Organization shows that women that have been sexually and physically abused have higher rates of mental health illness, unintended pregnancies, abortions and miscarriages than non-abused women. And statistics from 39 countries showed that 79,000 suicides were as a direct result of childhood sexual abuse. A high percentage of those were men. You could help make a difference in breaking the stigma around this issue and not only empower survivors, but also help to make it easier for future generations of children to speak out. Prevention is better than cure. If you have children, talk to them about their bodies. Teach them about good touch and bad touch, and the difference between keeping good and bad secrets. Build an open relationship with your child so they feel safe enough to communicate to you anything that worries them. Be open to initiating dialogue on this subject. By being open about it, it will help break down the walls of silence surrounding it. If you know a survivor, become that bridge of support by listening to that person. Don't judge, just listen. You could make the difference in that person opening up to receive further help. For the survivor, I know it is not easy to find your voice, but the first step to empowering yourself is to find your voice. It's the first step to personal freedom. In sharing my experience, I hope that you too can find hope and courage. Thank you.